That's true. I don't know how to. I get a cab. But you know what? That was why. Yeah, that can. Well, it's pretty good with the light. said, there's 4 people. Well, we're out, you should be, yeah. What we would do. She would have 3
Have started in 2 minutes.
You do you.
Heads up.
Good morning, everyone. Earlier this week, I had the sad privilege, to meet with some of the inspiring students from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. As you know, they have been in Washington, D.C., speaking to students their own ages in high school and conveying their determination to members of Congress. It was interesting to hear how determined they are to make change and to understand that some of it will have to unfold, but they wanted meaningful change. We've all been moved by their heartbreaking eloquence. They were insisting on action to prevent gun violence. The American people overwhelmingly agree with them. 97% of Americans support requiring background checks for all gun buys, including almost the same percentage among gun owners. There's a commensurate bipartisan, a common sense bipartisan path forward. Yesterday, we were encouraged by what President Trump had to say. Our members who attended the meeting joined with Mike Thompson in putting out a statement last night. That would be Mike Thompson, who's of California, who's the chair of our task force to prevent gun violence, joined by Elizabeth Esty of Connecticut, who had Newtown in her district, Stephanie Murphy, close to Pulse in Orlando area, and of course Ted Deutsch, most affected most recently. And their report was that they what they heard the president say, and some of you watched it all. We heard the president say that agreed that we should fix NICS and reexamine the Dickey Amendment so that CDC can research the public health crisis. That actually is the bill of Stephanie Murphy, and hopefully that will be incorporated in whatever we do to go forward. The president agreed that we need to ban bump stocks. He thinks he can do it by executive order. I don't think so. I think it needs to be done legislatively, but we agree that they should be banned. Embrace the idea of gun violence restraining orders, which empower law enforcement to intervene when someone is a threat to themselves or to others. This, again, common sense. The president stated unequivocally, you all saw that we should drop concealed carry reciprocity from the Fix NICS bill. And he made a commitment to take action on comprehensive background checks. So, once again, the president has had a public meeting with members of Congress, the three that I mentioned from the House directly affected by tragic events in their own districts or in their own areas. And we hope that we can proceed in a bipartisan way to get the most effective package forward. There are other issues like, well, I won't get into the other issues. Let's go on where we have the most agreement now. But unfortunately, in the Trump budget it proposed for NICS funding, his administration, they've done two things. In previous actions, they've tried to take names off the NICS list. And in the budget, they reduced the funding for NICS. But I think now, with a more awareness on the president's part about what NICS is about, we'll see a better attention to that. Whether the item I was going to bring up was the assault weapon ban, which has overwhelming public support as well, not as high as the background checks, but overwhelming public support. That might take longer. We need to have the best package we can get done now that is good enough with comprehensive background checks and the other items that I mentioned. This is a tipping point. We're at a tipping point in our country, and I'm really very proud of the work that Mike Thompson has done as chairman of our task force. He was with us 2 weeks ago at this venue. Now, he announced yesterday, but put out that we have reached 200 bipartisan co-sponsors for the Thompson-King, that would be Peter King of New York, Republican, legislation to strengthen and improve the background system. House Democrats also filed a discharge petition. Perhaps you saw that, the Thompson-King background check bill, which has a high number of signatories, as well as the Background Check Completion Act, closing the loophole that allows someone like the Charleston shooter to purchase a gun, even though the FBI had not completed his background check. It's really, I spend time on this because there's very specific legislation that would be very helpful to save lives, and we have an opportunity. There's public support for it. The children are so the young people are so eloquent about this, and they ask the question, why can't we do this? I know if the comprehensive bill came to the floor on background checks, it would win. So we're just saying to the speaker, give us a vote. Just give us a vote. Again, all of this has bipartisan support, and that is really important. So when people ask me all the time, what are the three most important issues facing the Congress? I always say the same thing. Our children, our children, our children. Their health, their education, the economic security of their families, clean, safe environment in which they can thrive, a world at peace in which they can reach their fulfillment. Just all about the future. When kids come here, I say, you see all these monuments to our founders and tributes to the past, and it's important that we are grateful for that contribution and recognize it as our value system, but part of that value system is that everything we do is about the future. And so this issue, this gun safety issue about the safety of our children looms large, clean, safe environment in which they can thrive. Another issue that affects the children, of course, are dreamers. Every day, more dreamers are losing their DACA protections, more than 22,000. When White House or some others say, oh, there's no need to do anything. No, 22,000, over 120, say a day, lose their protections. That is, just the protection to go to school, to drive, to work, etc. House Republicans still have not scheduled a vote to protect the Dreamers. Again, just give us a vote. Give us a vote. We know it would pass in a bipartisan way. And I thank our Republican members who have been so courageous in coming forward. When we protect the Dreamers, it's a wonderful thing, and they're so great and they inspire us so much, but it's not just about them. It's about the highest ideals of America. Their patriotism, their courage, their optimism are an inspiration that stirs the conscience of our entire nation. We're so proud of them, and we'll continue to fight in a bipartisan way for action for these extraordinary people. March 5th is the date of the president when he announced the rescission, when he announced that he was going to rescind President Obama's executive orders on DACA and their families. The National Catholic Conference of Bishops called that decision reprehensible. That's pretty strong language for the Catholic bishops to use on a Republican president, but it was reprehensible. So in any event, we continue to try to make the case in case they don't know what the protections are that are being lost, the fright that they are instilling in the hearts of so many people, and how emblematic this is for the whole issue of comprehensive immigration writ large. And of course, I'll just close with talking about the GOP tax scam. Every day that goes by, we see more evidence that it is exactly that, a tax scam. We continue to put out the truth on the tax scam's massive giveaways to corporations and the wealthy and its consequences for workers, seniors, and families. You know, 83% of the benefits goes to the top 1%. Every day, with $1.5 trillion in tax cuts, plus interest, taking us to over $2 trillion in debt, to give corporations nearly $1.5 trillion tax cut. Now, every day we see more corporations announcing stock buybacks to enrich their executives and investors instead of increasing the wages on an ongoing basis of workers. Morgan Stanley analysts estimated that 43% of corporate tax savings would go to buybacks and dividends, and nearly 19% would help pay for mergers and acquisitions, taking us up to almost 2/3 of the whole tax package. Just 13% would go to bonuses and raises. Today, the Wall Street Journal found that more than $200 billion in corporate buybacks were just announced in the past 3 months. Over $200 billion in buyback. And once the tax scam is fully phased in, 6 million middle-class families, 86 million middle-class families will pay higher taxes, while the wealthiest 1%, again, get the 83% of the tax cut. The tax scam will never pay for itself. That's really pathetic that they would even put that out there. As a Trump budget shows, after adding $2 trillion to the debt, Republicans are now saying, oh my gosh, that can't pay for itself. We've got to pay for it someplace else. So let's take $2 trillion out of Medicare, $500 billion out of Medicare, $500 billion out of Medicare, $1.5 trillion out of Medicaid. And then, of course, the president's budget also makes cuts in food stamps, education, HUD, housing and urban development, other issues that help us meet the needs of the American people. But so when they represent that it's going to pay for itself, as I've told you before, Bruce Bartlett, among others, have said it's not true, it's nonsense, it's BS. That's what he said, but he said the whole words. Anyway, we want to have, people say to us, what would you do? We said we'd have bipartisanship, as we have always had on any long-term tax revision. Democrats want real bipartisan tax reform that puts the middle class first. We have a better deal, better jobs, better pay, a better future for the American people. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Coming back from that meeting, a lot of Republicans said that they haven't changed their minds on guns, the gun use state, the White House. with that in mind, there's a sense, and you saw that even among the Democrats at the meeting, that President Trump is going to have to be very hands-on and put a lot of pressure
Yeah.
on the Republicans to do anything. How involved, in your estimation, is the White House at this point? Have you had any talks with the president or other officials about how hands-on they're going to be?
No.
Or is it your sense that they punted it to Congress and they'll see what happens?
Well, this is a back and forth we've seen before. Of course, we saw this same meeting on Dreamers, where people came together and there was going to be bipartisanship and we're going to get together, and then that faded. I think this is different. I think that while the Dreamers are enjoy high, over 80% favorable ratings among the American people, the sense of urgency on the gun bill is one that either it's yes or no. I mean, the White House is saying on the Dreamers, well, we can do it now, we can do it later. But with guns, you either do it or you don't do it. One of the interesting words that I heard coming out from, I think Senator Toomey said, he was breathless. That's some of what the president said. I think breathless is a good word to describe this whole thing. We're breathless when we hear the assault on our kids. Breathless to see the characterization that the National Rifle Association places on all of this. Breathless. And we are breathless to hear that some of the Republicans are breathless about what the president had to say. I always take people at their word. I take people at their word. In terms of DACA, I don't like the timing, but I do believe the president wants to do the right thing there. And I'm disappointed that some of his advisors are weighing in more heavily than they should. But nonetheless, on this, it's life and death right away. And we really need to get this done. So I'm optimistic. Our members came back. I read you some of the things. They put out their own statements on promising statements that the president made. But I tell you, these young people who, with their knowledge or savvy of social media, the articulate eloquence that they have put forth about what they saw and how they don't want this to happen to anyone else, we're really at a tipping point on this. But America's at a tipping point on a number of things, whether it was sexual harassment, whether it's Dreamers, whether it's this. Public is paying attention. And as you've heard me say before, Abraham Lincoln, public sentiment is everything. With it, you can accomplish almost anything. Without it, almost nothing. And the public sentiment is here. The president reads that very clearly.
But you said you're not having direct talks with the White House.
Not yet, no, but they just had the meeting yesterday.
How do you anticipate that this conversation will proceed? Ryan's not going to bring anything to the floor.
Well, the conversation he has to have is with his own party, because that's where the majority is, the power to bring to the floor. Now, we do have for background checks a discharge petition, and we hope that Republicans would join us in that. We have 200, and we hope to have more names, but 200 they've never had anything like 200 names on a gun safety bill. This is remarkable. So we, again, calmly, prayerfully, hopefully and respectfully, hope that the president will make clear to the Republicans in Congress that we have to move forward, and not just some little bill that said, well, we did that. No, it has to be substantial. It might not be everything. It might not be the assault weapon ban, but practically anything short of that is what we would expect. I'll let you know what communication we have with them, okay? Yes, ma'am.
Speaking of sexual harassment, do you support legislation that requires revealing the names of members of Congress who have benefited in the past from taxpayer funds for sexual harassment settlements?
Well, I do believe that there's a equity that has to be weighed there. Do the victims want that to be known? Yes, I would think that the public should know if a member of Congress has had public funds spent to resolve it. But when you say that, then the victims say, well, I'm not necessarily in favor of my whole situation being made known. So that's the calibration, I would say. So if you do that without harming the victims, that's something important to talk about. But I do think that the idea as we go forward, people have to know that we don't want to deter victims from coming forward because they don't want to be in the public domain. So we have to take that in consideration. But I think the public would like to know, and I respect that.
So do you support the bill by Congressman DeSantis that actually asked for that?
What I just said, I would have to see what that means to the victims. Yes, I think the elected officials, the members of Congress, should be held accountable. I don't want to harm victims who may say, I entered into a confidentiality agreement, and it was in my interest to do so as well. You understand my point? So I think there's a way that we can write a bill. I don't know the particulars of his bill except as you describe it, and I know that about it. But I do think there's a bill that can be written that takes into consideration the rights, the privacy, the harm done to a victim if we just opened all of that up. And maybe it can be, I don't know, if a member is charged with something, how clear is the path back to the victim? In some cases, maybe very clear. In other cases, maybe not. What do you think?
It's not what I think. I want to know.
No, but I'm just saying that you have to take into consideration what it means for the victim. So I think you asked me about a specific bill. I'm saying I think there's possibly legislation that says that anybody who has done this or does it in the future, this will be made known to the public as long as the victim agrees to that.
And you would support that?
Yeah, for sure. Yes, ma'am.
Pelosi, earlier this week, the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, had his security clearance downgraded. As you know, top secret security clearance is important to serve in those high
Right,
positions in
yeah.
the White House. Today, there's a report that his family's companies obtained hundreds of millions of dollars of loans after he met with officials. Do you think the president's son-in-law should still be serving in a senior position in the White House?
No, I don't think he should have been there to begin with, especially with the portfolio that he had. The president doesn't place a high value on experience, knowledge, and judgment. He just, I guess, it's people he knows and trusts, and he places a value on that, and that's something to be considered for a president, of course. But this is, what I'm worried about right now in the White House is the revolving door. It's spinning like a top. I said last year at the Gridiron Dinner, if you want to work in the Trump administration, know your blood type, because you'll be thrown under the bus. I mean, we know we could see that coming anyway. But as people leave before they get thrown under the bus, or seeing it coming, or just wanting not to be there, they're having served in that White House for 1 year is a giant enhancement as they go out to the public sector, the private sector. And so I think that it takes us to a place where we have to look at this revolving door issue, whether it's Congress, but largely it's the executive branch. I'm going to go do my public service, and then I'm going to have more value in the private side. Now, of course, people go in and out of the public sector, and that's a legitimate thing. But these drop-bys and then get enhanced jobs elsewhere, something's wrong with this picture. What is the purpose of people coming into public service? What is their knowledge? What is their judgment? What is the vision that they have that makes them important to be appointed by the President of the United States, given security clearance, which is a very high-level anointment, and use that position while they're in the job to get another job or to get investments into their family's companies. This is corrosion of integrity in government. And I think that the Trump family has engaged in that in a way, well, from what the public domain says, we'll see what else there is. Okay, one more?
Can I ask you to update us on the omnibus, particularly the riders? There's a lot of riders in there on policy
Yeah.
issues like the 9 and such. Where do those talks stand?
Excuse me? Where does it stand? Oh, here's the thing. Without going into too much detail, we reached an agreement, as you know. It was a triumph for us because we got what we wanted in terms of parity in increasing the domestic budget at the same rate as we increased the defense budget. We all know we take an oath to protect and defend our country, so the defense budget is very important. But 1/3 of the domestic budget is security, Homeland Security, Department of State, anti-terrorism activities of the Justice Department, Veterans Affairs. These are security functions. That's 34% of the domestic budget. And so in getting that parity in the increase was a big victory. I remind you that President Trump had over $50 billion cut from the domestic side in his proposals, and the Republicans took it to even, and we've gotten it over to over $60 billion above, so it's over $100 billion from where the president came in. So this is about, again, the security functions that I mentioned. It's about opioids. It's about more money for our veterans, for program and infrastructure. It's about National Institutes of Health with the biblical power to cure. The list goes on about priorities that we designated. And then there was a larger amount of money for the committees to negotiate. Usually, in that negotiation, the poison pills come at the end. I hope that that will be how it goes now, and that we don't see any reneging on the agreement that we made, in addition to which reneging on what that means for next year, because next year is 6 months from now, September 30th. Well, 7 months is the new fiscal year. So I was an appropriator. That's where one place I was forged, intelligence, the other place here in the Congress. I know left to their own devices, the appropriators can work it out. It's what comes from on high in terms of these poison pills that are problematic. And I think that, well, we'll just see what the poison pills are as we go forward, but that's where it is.
And Leader, can I follow up on that? Given
Please.
the conversations of the last few days on guns, is the Dickey Amendment in particular, given that it's germane to appropriations, is that going to be a top Democratic priority going into the omnibus talk?
Well, I met with the Secretary of HHS, I guess it was a few days. I've completely lost track of time in terms of all that is going on here with beautiful Billy Graham lying in honor in the Capitol and the rest, so beautiful. Earlier in the week, I met with the Secretary, and he told me that he did not see the Dickey Amendment as preventing research. And in fact, it really doesn't, but it does. I mean, it chills, but you can engage in research without overturning the Dickey Amendment. The Dickey Amendment, it's something about studying the impacts. Well, some people might call that research, others not. But I think Mr. Cole has said something to the effect that it won't be coming up. But I think the American people know that it's, and the president seemed receptive to it in the conversations of yesterday, that the Dickey Amendment should be, for whatever it does, should be repealed. And you know who agrees? Bless his heart, Congressman Dickey. He's no longer with us, but when he was, he wrote a letter saying that this is not his intention.
Are Democrats pushing to eliminate it in the omnibus?
Well, we're hoping to have it in a comprehensive gun violence prevention package. This is probably the easiest thing that they can do. It always fascinated me as a member of the Appropriations Committee in the 90s and the rest when we would try to have a measure of head injuries for children. Just, was it tricycle accidents? Is it domestic violence? What is that? And what I found out was the reason we couldn't move forward is because of the NRA, because they did not want to have any measure of head injuries from guns. So they really penetrated the system in establishing obstacles to evidence-based decision-making about what is the challenge we face, how do we reach solutions. So I think this issue will be resolved, hopefully as part of the gun issue. I think that, again, public sentiment would be there to say, why would we obstruct data, evidence, truth, facts about gun violence from being part of our decision-making? That's a question we've all had for a long time. I think, again, we're at a tipping point where the American people are well aware of the dangers to their own children, to our society, and we see a path that is, again, bipartisan, respectful of the Second Amendment, acknowledging everyone's right to defend themselves, but to do so in a way that anybody who wants a gun should have a background check, and nobody who shouldn't have a gun shouldn't have it. They just shouldn't have it. Thank you. They are, but I say it's more chilling than in actually the words, if you read the words. Yeah, so that's what they say. Well, it doesn't, the secretary said to me, that's not what the Dickey Amendment does. And we certainly intend to research. And that was the impression. I didn't see his presentation before the Energy and Commerce Committee, but the representation that he made to me was that's how he represented it at the Energy and Commerce Committee. You might want to see his words there.
Thank you.
Dan Lipinski, you support his reelection?
Yes, I do.
You do?
I do.
Thank you.